Jabal poked me and made the sign of silence, and then pointed towards a bush about 10 meters away. I could not see anything special, so I shrugged and started to turn. But then I saw the movement. The thing was 3 meters long and low to the ground. The body was covered in plates of what looked like chitin. The thing's colour and the ridges in the plates almost perfect camouflage against the bushes. As I watched, transfixed by this thing, it slowly moved from bush to bush by gathering its back half up and then pushing the front half forward. It would take great strength to move like that. The wind changed, and I could smell nutmeg and chocolate. Jabal silently giggled as he took a deep breath. Turning to me, he whispered, "If you can't see them, you can always smell them. Now let's kill it and get dinner going." Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast where I, Matt Risby, and I alone, am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. This week's Tale from the Drift was from SugarSkullStormtooper, whose oracle rolls were entirely from the creature tables, and from those results he has crafted a very good piece of flash fiction indeed, and I want to say a big, heartfelt thank you to him for doing so. If you want to roll some dice and write something for me to read at the beginning of a future episode, then the submission guidelines and contact details are on screen now. And please do not hang around, as I only have a handful of slots left for the remaining 10 episodes of this season. Whilst I have your attention, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon, where you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes videos, and your name on screen, like these lovely people. Last time out, Archer convinced the others to allow him to try and find the precursor vault he is convinced is somewhere in the spine of Kronos. It is revealed that the Eclipse has long held navigational data that was seemingly incorrect, referring to places that did not appear to exist. The Professor was obsessed with the coordinates, but never shared their importance with Archer. However, in this strange place, governed by strange energies, Archer has found that one of the coordinates is now registering on the map, and he is convinced that this is where the Precursor Vault must be. He's also convinced that any Precursor Vault must be part of the Iron Gate network. Although he's basing a lot of this on a hunch, this just about sways the others, although they remain mostly dubious. They set a course for the now visible coordinates and come across a wrecked pirate galleon, which appears to have been severed clean in two, although the rear half of the ship is nowhere to be seen. As they investigate, they are interrupted by the thing that did this, which is also the thing that tried to attack them back at the beacon. It is a monstrous craft, part machine, part chaotic living construct. It must have been a ship at some point, but the eldritch forces at work in this place have corrupted it into some horrifying mechanical creature. The environment around the Eclipse becomes unstable, and the ship loses power as this monstrous thing moves in on their position. So that was a cliffhanger, wasn't it? And I received some messages in the week saying that I was perhaps a bit harsh on poor old Archer, but I actually beg to differ, because I think sometimes I go a bit too easy on him, and I have to remind you that it was a miss with a match, and double tens at that. And if that's not cause for harsh treatment, then frankly, I don't know what is. And what we've got here is a real pickle. But Archer did say he had a plan. Now, did I know what that plan was when I narrated it last week? No, I did not. Did I just say that at the end of the episode so it would end on a cliffhanger, thinking that I would figure it out in the elapsed time between episodes? No comment. So, how are we going to get out of this jam? Well, we'll get to that. But first, the alleyway below the Institute labs was a hive of activity, bustling with hawkers, mid-rim traders, and a myriad of food vendors slinging their wares in amongst the steam and neon. This was in stark contrast to the empty, featureless waiting room in which Archer Barlow found himself, drumming his fingers on the windowsill with impatience. He hated the Institute. He hated the terminus. But the smells drifting up from the alleyway below and the accompanying hunger he felt was making him pause briefly to reconsider that assessment. But ultimately, he was dying to get out of here. This 2-day stop had been 2 days too long. He turns as Professor Zari Darwin enters the room, looking deflated, and he says, "I guess that didn't go well." Short-sighted, belligerent fools, every last one of them. "So I take it we're staying?" "No, quite the opposite. We leave in an hour." And she looks worried. Archer can't ever remember seeing her look worried. "We are being reassigned." "Why? We're so close." And the professor nods and says, "We cannot abandon our search. We've come too far." And she pulls Archer in conspiratorially and says, "We must finish what we started." And then she hustles out of the door before shouting back, "1 hour, Barlow. Be ready." And Archer looks wistfully out of the window down towards the food vendors, trying to work out just how long it will take to get to the launch bay. And we are back in the present, and oh boy, what a present it is. The Eclipse has no power, no E-drive, no nothing, and a titanic chaotic construct, which is part ship, part monstrous reptile, is working its way towards them. So what are we going to do? Well, with no power, there's not really a great deal we can do. This thing is epic in comparison to the Eclipse. If it was a whale, we would be a goldfish. That is the kind of scale we are talking. And I also think that that is how Archer is helping to rationalize this situation. He is now kind of making a plan in the face of this monstrous threat. And I think he is pretty calm. He is collected because there actually isn't anything he can do, right? The power is out. They are dead in the water. But he is trying to work something out, trying to think it through. And I think that he also recognizes that the power outage that they are currently experiencing must be temporary, because it seemed to occur when this thing appeared. Whatever energy it was that brought this thing through that chaotic portal is starting to dissipate. The kind of yellowy green clouds that accompanied this thing's arrival are now fading into the dust, and the lightning that went with it is fizzling out. And he's willing to bet that the surge of power that pushed this thing through the chaotic portal is just that. It's just a surge. It's not some deliberate EMP-style device that this thing deployed to take the Eclipse out. And I don't want to keep calling this thing this thing. I think it deserves a name. So, what have we got? Do you know what? I'm just going to call it the Leviathan. There we go. Keep it simple. That is what I'm calling it. So I think that the whole crew is watching the Leviathan snaking in their direction, and Archer is just kind of crunching all this over in his head, kind of reasoning it out, calculating the odds, formulating a plan on the fly. And like I said, he is relatively calm, which the others are definitely not. Cole And his crewmates are visibly panicking at the situation. They are completely fried by this whole situation anyway. And this new development is just the icing on the cake. And I think that Luna is probably more inwardly scared, but you know her, she's trying not to show it. She's just kind of watching Archer, kind of watching those cogs in his head spinning, watching him formulate some kind of escape. And whilst she can't see a way out of this, she definitely trusts him to figure it out. And figure it out he must. They currently have no power and only a partially charged E-drive. And no mincing of words here, the Leviathan will end them instantly if it gets them, and they have nowhere to hide. There's just the Eclipse, the Leviathan, and what's left of the wreckage of the Drift Pirate Galleon. The only means of escape they have is charging the E-drive and jumping away and hoping that this thing can't instantaneously just follow them, because it appeared from nowhere. It just arrived through this weird chaotic portal. It can seem to jump from place to place, and that is bad news. But they can't charge the E-drive without power. And whilst Archer has kind of figured out that the loss of power is temporary, and that they can turn it back on as soon as the chaotic energy that opened the portal kind of fades completely, he also thinks, and this is his big theoretical breakthrough, he also thinks that without power, the Leviathan cannot see them or sense them or whatever it does. He thinks that until they do actually turn the power back on, they are effectively invisible. And he is about to test that theory. So the Leviathan is bearing down. It is heading towards them. They are helpless. They are sitting ducks. They are fish in a barrel. They are any other kind of metaphor you can think of. But Archer has a plan. And right now, that plan is to do nothing. He watches the Leviathan and says, "It's searching for an energy signature. It can't see us." And they all watch as it gets nearer. The immense bulk of its hull coming into view, its prow, the snout of this thing is moving slowly from side to side as it closes the distance, moving in, moving closer, and it is real close now, maybe even 100 meters away, maybe less. And as it gets closer, they can all see in horrifying detail how grotesque and twisted this thing is. Those ragged teeth are composed of rusted shards of metal. And the contours of the features it has, those animalistic features, they are warped, fused metal, twisted into these dreadful organic shapes. It's now even closer, 50 meters maybe, 40, then 30. And Archer watches, and he looks into the Leviathan's eyes, these hollow sockets on top of its head, these deep, abyssal black holes. And then he's instantly somewhere else. He is in a rocky desert again. There's no eclipse, no Luna, nothing. Nothing except the glassy black spire ahead of him. And this is the clearest he's seen it. And he takes a step back to look up, and he watches it stretch up into the cloudless blue sky, curving up and around and inwards like the blade of a knife. It stands maybe 30 meters high. And as Archer steps back and looks at this thing, he notices another in the distance, maybe a kilometer away. And then beyond that, another, less clear through the heat haze. And then he turns around and looks in the opposite direction. And there's 2 more, equally spaced apart. And that is when he feels something pulling at his wrist. He looks down to see a hand fused with black iron. And the silence is punctured by a scream in the distance. And then he's back on the Eclipse. And he looks down at his wrist, and there is a hand there. It's Luna's hand. And she says, "Archer, you're right. It can't see us." And she points out of the cockpit, and they watch as the Leviathan's hulking mass passes by, moving slowly below where they are currently hanging, suspended in space. As Archer watches the whip-like tail disappear from view, the entire crew of the Eclipse move as one through the ship, passing the exhausted drakes in the hold as they move to the rear viewport. And from there, they watch as the Leviathan passes the wreckage of the galleon and moves further and further away into the dust. And this is where Archer is going to put his plan into action. This is where he's going to see if his theory is correct. He gives the signal for the pilot to fire everything up. And they do. Everything comes back on. All systems come online. The cabin lights come on. The searchlights come back on. The air is kind of filled with beeping and noise as every single system on the ship is coming back to life. The E-drive lights up. Monitors flick on, everything. The engines kick back in. And then Cole says, "Okay, let's go. What are we waiting for?" But Archer doesn't give the signal to jump. He is looking intently out of the rear viewport, watching the Leviathan. And it suddenly wheels around. It turns its titanic bulk back towards the Eclipse. And Cole says, "Barlow, let's go." But Archer shakes his head and says, "Kill the power. Everything. Now." And Cole doesn't get it, right? He doesn't respond. He just kind of sees the Leviathan moving back towards them, and his kind of eyes light up in panic again. But Luna steps in and reaches over and powers down the console, and the cabin once again goes dark. And they all turn their attention towards the rear viewpoint, and they watch as the Leviathan seems to slow. It seems to pause, almost like it has lost the scent. And the entire crew hold their collective breath as it slowly approaches once again and slowly passes harmlessly by. And Archer says, "Okay, now bear with me because this is going to sound crazy. If this thing follows energy signatures, then we'll give it one to follow. We'll power up, prime the surge blasters, and light up the wreckage. We'll then power down and wait for it to attack the signature. When it does, Luna will tag it with a tow cable and we'll clamp ourselves to its hull. It can't get us if we're attached to it. We'll sit there and charge the E-drive until it's full and then jump. Simple as that." And there's no response from the crew until Luna bursts out laughing and says, "Sure, I'm in." And Cole says, "We're going to attach ourselves to that thing." And Archer says, "It's that or politely ask it to leave." And Cole is like, "This is insane." But with no better option, Archer says, "Everyone get ready." So this is happening. This is a thing that is definitely happening. And I think that it might just qualify as the move Face Danger, which says when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And I think we could call this risky, couldn't we? Hatching an elaborate plan to attach yourself to a chaotic construct in the hope that it won't eat you so you can charge your E-drive and then disappear, hopefully, fingers crossed. I think that's definitely something that's risky. But how are we going to do it? I think that looking at the options, I think this is actually going to be deception, stealth, and trickery. So shadow, I think, because we're trying to lure this thing, right? We're trying to kind of tempt it to kind of come near us so we can attach the eclipse onto it and like ride it, I guess. Yep, I said it. Ride it. We are going to ride the Leviathan. So we are going to face danger, rolling, plus shadow. A weak hit. On a weak hit, you succeed, but not without cost. Make a suffer move. See, I knew this would work. Like, people need to trust me. It sounded crazy, but I knew it would work. So, what we'll do is we will resolve that suffer move in a bit. But first, let's envision how this perfectly executed and not at all stupid plan went down. So I think that they all are kind of watching as the Leviathan kind of is kind of a considerable distance away now. And it's kind of still searching for them, kind of sniffing out the eclipse. And on Archer's command, the pilot fires up the power once again and everything comes on. And with that, predictably, the Leviathan turns, kind of instantly seeking them out, kind of wheeling around towards them. And then the pilot kind of flares the thrusters and glides forward, kind of moving them around to the other side of the galleon wreckage, which is now the only thing between them and the Leviathan, the only thing between them and the incoming danger. And Archer asks, Surge blasters? And Cole's kind of looking at the console and says, nearly online. And then Archer grabs his comms unit and says, Luna? And down in the belly of the eclipse, Luna is kind of laid flat on her stomach, cramped into this teeny tiny crawl space with barely enough room for her to work the controls of the tow cable. And she's kind of awkwardly holding a little joystick in each hand and has this kind of periscope viewport clamped over her eyes. And Archer's voice comes over the comms and says, Luna, you in position? And Luna's like, I could do with a little more elbow room, but yes. And Archer says, Surge blasters? And Cole once again looks nervously down at the readout and says, nearly there. And they can see the outline of the Leviathan approaching. It is dwarfing the wreckage of the galleon that's between them. It's getting closer. And Cole says, nearly there. And Archer looks anxiously out once again. It must be seconds away. It must be imminently there. And then Cole says, it's hot. And Archer says, fire. And the surge blasters discharge, hitting the wreckage with a flash of light, sending blue and white crackling energy coursing through the twisted metal frame, this ruined galleon, and lighting up the entire area all around them. And then Archer shouts at the pilot, punch it! And the pilot pulls back on the yoke and brings them up and above the galleon. And then Archer reaches over and thumps that kill switch on the control board, plunging them once again into total darkness. And then it is deathly quiet for a split second as they watch the wreckage of the galleon fizzing with light. And then, on either side of what once was a great pirate ship, jagged teeth come into view as the Leviathan rolls onto its side and crashes through the wreckage, cleaving it in two, snapping its great jaws shut as it sends pieces of this thing still crackling with the hit from the surge blasters spinning through space. Its great snout passes a matter of meters underneath the eclipse and debris starts to smash into the hull, and there's this great metallic groan that is almost deafening that kind of reverberates through the cockpit and shakes Luna to her bones as she's the closest to it. But despite the noise, despite the commotion, she can still hear Archer screaming her name, screaming for her to fire the tow cable. She looks through the scopes, but she doesn't need them at all. The thing is right below her, and all she needs to do is pull the triggers. And she does. A great pneumatic hiss pumps the black cables out into space, and they unspool rapidly until they clamp onto the hull of the wretched Leviathan. And it's only a matter of seconds until they extend to their full length as the thing passes below. And then the eclipse is jerked violently downwards and spun around 180 degrees. And Archer crashes into the console and the others are sent sprawling onto the floor. And even though Luna doesn't have any room at all to move, she is still flung around the crawl space as they are being pulled into the Leviathan's wake. Archer steadies himself and gets Cole to his feet, and together they stagger out of the cockpit and through the ship as it's being pulled from side to side. And they reach the hatch where Luna is, and whilst they're being thrown around, Archer manages to cling on, and he pulls open a panel behind which lives the manual override for the winch. And he pulls it out and he starts to crank. And when Cole manages to get to his feet, he helps. And the two of them are doing this. All the while they can see Luna's little legs flailing out of the hatch on the floor. And slowly the winch pulls them closer. But all the while the Leviathan writhes and snaps at the wreckage, pulling the Eclipse through the debris as it does. And it's taking a real pounding, a real battering. The hull is getting scraped and dented from all sides, and Archer and Cole continue to turn the winch handle, and it's getting harder and harder with every rotation. The Leviathan pulls clear of the wreckage, and as it does, the rest of the crew manage to join Archer and Cole and work the winch. They all pitch in, and after a huge, huge effort, they finally touch down on the Leviathan's back. Luna pulls herself out of the crawl space and joins everyone else in the cockpit. And Cole manually activates the docking clamps, which locks the ship into place. And the whole crew look out of the viewport at this surreal sight of them piggybacking on this giant mechanical creature as it snakes around and heads for what's left of the galleon, which is still popping with the residual charge from the surge blasters. And Luna says, well, that was something. And I think now's a good time to resolve that suffer move. I think the most logical thing here is for the ship to have taken some damage because it was ragged around pretty good. And I think that whilst nothing important is damaged, the hull, I think, has taken a real battering, and by kind of all the debris and detritus that it's smashed into, I think that's cause enough to bump the ship's integrity down from 5 to 4. And then Cole, not unreasonably, asks, what now? And Archer says, power up. Vitals and E-drive only. And Cole anxiously moves over to the console and brings the E-drive and vital systems back online. And I think that there has to be some reaction to this from the Leviathan. It has to sense it. So yeah, I think the E-drive lights up and some vitals come on, but it's still dark in the cabin. Not everything is kind of back up and running. And they all look out along the length of the Leviathan, and they see that its kind of head snaps back as far as it can go, and it kind of tries to rock and roll them from kind of one side to the other as this kind of great beast tries to kind of rotate around and try and get to this signature, trying to kind of double back on itself. But it's mechanical, it's not flexible, so its movement is limited. And it kind of rolls back the other way, and the crew are kind of forced to cling on as they're buffeted around. But ultimately, the Leviathan's actions are fruitless. It can't do anything about this tiny insect-sized passenger it has riding on its back. And that's how it goes. Like the next kind of half an hour or so, the crew anxiously ride out the E-drive's charging time whilst clamped to the back of an increasingly agitated, chaotic construct. So what's the ultimate plan here? What's the end game? Like, once we're charged, do we just jump, like, off its back? I think that is incredibly risky. And I think the Archer recognizes the need to perhaps like play it safe and maybe try and get some distance from the Leviathan before they do that. And kind of only jump once the E-Drive is charged and they have that distance, or actually maybe if they stay powered down long enough after it's charged, will it kind of just move on? I think it probably will, and I think that's maybe what Archer is banking on. So yeah, okay, let's just wind the clock forward a bit, and now let's say that the E-Drive is fully charged. Cole and the others are kind of like looking at the display, and they're kind of really eager to just fire it up and jump. But Archer calmly orders the power to be turned off again. And when it is turned off, the Leviathan is instantly less aggravated, like instantly kind of less animated. And let's say they kind of circle around one more time, and as the Leviathan passes by one of the larger bits of wreckage that still remains, Archer gives Luna the order to detach the tow cables. And they detach, and they drift harmlessly in amongst the detritus that is now everywhere. And kind of from that safe position, they watch as the gigantic beast continues to circle, continues to patrol the area, relentlessly searching in amongst the debris, trying to sniff them out, trying to find that energy signature. But I think that Archer is right. And after a while, that crackling, cloudy energy, those milky plumes of yellow and green start to form off in the distance, and the great behemoth gives up its search and glides towards it, this great vortex of chaotic energy, and it slowly starts disappearing through it. The long, thrashing tail is the last thing to disappear into the dust, leaving the relieved crew of the Eclipse behind amongst the twisted metal of the Drift pirate galleon. And after checking the coast is clear one last time, Archer finally says, "Okay, now let's go." And the crew kind of busy themselves and quickly power everything up, and the Eclipse comes to life. There's this flurry of activity as coordinates are punched in and consoles are fired up and everyone mans their stations. But Archer is still kind of looking back out amongst the wreckage, kind of still scanning for threats, and they are almost ready to jump, when once again the space outside turns yellow and green, and the snout of the Leviathan bursts into view. And as it does, Cole plunges the handle of the E-Drive down, and the Eclipse burns brightly in red and orange as it turns into a bright streak against the gloom, disappearing into the drift just as the jaws of the Leviathan come snapping down into the space it just vacated. And everyone is kind of looking at each other like wide-eyed and frazzled by the fact that they just narrowly avoided getting chomped after all that the Leviathan had just been waiting for them to power up again. And they're going to have to be like wary of that. But hopefully this jump can put sufficient distance between them and that monstrous thing. Even though distance is nothing, if you can just kind of instantaneously teleport. I guess we'll catch up with their own logic there at some point. So we are now picking up the expedition again. And I think that because we hustled out of there pretty quickly, this is going to be undertake an expedition, moving at speed. So rolling plus edge. A strong hit. On a strong hit, you reach a waypoint. Envision the location and mark progress per the rank of your expedition. So we are up to 6 progress on our expedition across the spine of Kronos. Now, I really, really want to get cracking here. We have spent nearly 3 episodes in the spine, and I'm pretty wary of this getting tired, even though the kind of chaotic nature of this place gives me pretty much free reign to imagine all kinds of like weird shit. I really don't want this to kind of outstay its welcome, so I'm going to use this strong hit to kind of give the characters a break and have them stop somewhere briefly, And I'm going to say that they drop out of the drift into a place of relative safety. And I'm going to just quickly roll on the Spaceborne Opportunity Oracle to get some inspiration of what that safe haven might look like. 67 says mineral or energy resource detected. Okay. So what if we drop out of the drift and like the crew are still like super anxious about being followed or attacked by, if not the Leviathan, something else awful that's kind of waiting for them in this terrible, terrible place. But what if when they do drop, they drop into this really unusual asteroid belt, and it's an asteroid belt where the asteroids are these chunks of translucent, kind of glassy, pale blue material that kind of glows when the eclipse approaches. And I think that amongst these asteroids, like everything just seems a little brighter, like the E-drive charges a little quicker, everything seems to run a little faster, and the ship gets kind of swept up along in this kind of flow of pale blue glassy shards of this stuff that's kind of circling round and round like this kind of like calming, steady current. And it's like some strange energy whirlpool, and Archer reasons that they will be perfectly safe here because if this asteroid, and this asteroid field is like big, right? It stretches out for like a vast distance, like as far as the eye can see in this kind of stretch of the spine. And for the Leviathan to find them in amongst this would be pretty difficult because it hunts its kind of prey, it kind of senses energy signals, right? And this is an environment that appears to be just pure energy. So he reasons they'll be safe there. And it's kind of beautiful, this place. It's really calm, and it has this serene kind of underwater vibe. And also maybe there's like these little life forms kind of dancing in amongst the shards, like little energy wisps or something, kind of darting between the asteroids, leaving glittering white and blue trails behind them. And it's kind of entrancing to watch as they kind of flicker this way and that. And even though he's kind of cautious and kind of anxious about it, Archer just allows everyone this moment of peace, allows everyone to kind of watch for a while. But then they really do have to get moving, and he reminds them all that they can't stay here and it is time to move on. And with a kind of renewed sense of grim resolve, coordinates are punched into the drive, and they are once again ready to jump into the drift. Away from this serenity, they must leap into the terrifying unknown. Archer gives the signal, and Cole fires up the E-drive once again, taking one last look at the beautiful crystal blue scene outside. And I think that we will be taking a different approach here, I think that being in this belt of pure energy, I think that means that like we've quickly and efficiently charged like all our reserve batteries and backup systems, which I think means that we can jump this time, and maybe with all that power in reserve we can maybe divert some of the power we need into those reserves, because we want to leave like less of an energy signature to kind of avoid being found by the Leviathan. So I think that counts as kind of trying to stay under the radar. So I think we are going to be undertaking an expedition rolling plus shadow. That is a weak hit. Now I could burn my momentum here, but I think we're just going to need to save that for if something gets really bad. So what I'm going to do is I think we're just going to ride out this weak hit. So we get to mark progress per the rank of the expedition. So we are up to 7 on our expedition across the spine of Kronos now. And on a weak hit, the progress costs you can choose to either suffer costs en route or face a peril at the waypoint. Envision what you encounter. And I think I know how I want this to play out. So the eclipse is hurtling through the drift, and Archer isn't sure if it's just the effect of the peaceful place they just left, or if all that cosmic energy genuinely had a positive effect on the ship. But this is a smooth ride. The eclipse is just sailing through time and through space. There's no blaring alarms, no juddering chassis. It is plain sailing. But then the navigational console lets them all know that they are about to arrive, and the swirling red and purple mists of the drift begin to recede around the ship. And the entire crew leans forward expectantly, ready to take evasive action against any incoming threats. But Archer suddenly feels sun on his face, and his mouth is dry. He finds himself once again in the rocky, arid desert, looking at the glassy spires breaking forth from the pale sand. He can still feel the grip of someone holding on to him. He blinks in the blinding sun and tries to focus on who this person is. He sees once again a hand fused with black iron gripping onto his wrist. He follows the hand to a sleeve. A simple, tattered grey robe shrouds a short person, face covered, shielded from the scorching sun. Their other hand, also fused with the obsidian black metal, reaches up and pulls the covering away from their face. And Archer finds himself looking into the eyes of the shadow he inadvertently freed from the Grand Inquisitor on Sepulchre. Their piercing gaze makes Archer step back. And then once again he hears that voice in his head, and it says, "Find them. Bring them peace." And then Archer is back in the cockpit, and his head is ringing. As he kind of comes to, he realizes that his head is ringing because Luna has just slapped him incredibly hard in the face. And she is stood in front of him, ready to do it again. But she kind of eases down when she sees him kind of regaining his composure and his sense of his surroundings. And she says, "Are you with me?" And he nods. And she says, "You've got to see this." And she steps aside, and Archer can't help but see it. Even though these things are incredibly rare, and he has never even seen actual evidence of one before, he knows instantly that what he's seeing in front of him is a precursor vault. As with everything in Ironsworn, there is an oracle to bring these things to life. So let's roll up some details. What is the scale, first of all? 81. Large, elaborate site. And the form? 62 is monument. Okay, what shape is this thing? 39 is geometric, ring, or torus. And next is material, but I think I'm just going to pick, I'm not going to roll this because there's one that fits actually really nicely from what's happened before. I'm going to go for 72, crystalline or glass-like. So before them is a huge ring-shaped structure. And I think that it's sort of squarish, kind of like a blocky ring. And it's smooth and icy blue. And it is just hanging in space before them. It looks so incongruous compared to all the twisted, chaotic forms they've seen so far. And it certainly looks out of place amongst the dense, swirling dust clouds of the spine of Kronos. But this isn't completely new to them. The structure and what the material this thing is made of has a very, very similar appearance to the strange asteroids that they just found themselves in amongst. In fact, this thing has a strange resonance that is instantly recognizable as the same energy signature as those glassy shards. Okay, let's get a first look. 11. 11 is broken or fragmented. Oh, okay, yeah, I like that. So as Archer kind of looks closer, he can see that the surface of this thing is actually splintered, and in places the exterior is shattered. And you can see that mainly from the way it refracts the light that's pulsing from it. The energy is kind of like distorted in a strange way. And I wonder maybe if those asteroids, those pieces, might have at one time been part of this thing. Cole comes up beside Archer and says, "Is that?" And Archer says, "Yes, it is. Bring us in closer." And the eclipse starts to approach this strange and beautiful thing. But we rolled ourselves a weak hit, didn't we? So that's a suffer move or a peril. Now, suffer moves don't really make a great deal of sense here, so how about this? What if this thing is broken a little bit and perhaps part of it has become unstable? Like that calming, blissful energy we experienced out in the asteroid field is still present, but in and around the broken or shattered segments of the vault, it's like way more unstable and unpredictable. And maybe when the energy pulses through some of the broken parts, that resonance is replaced by something like more menacing, like when a light is flickering on and off and there's something in the dark. I really like that idea. Like we're kind of safe whilst it's on, but it's kind of burning out. Now we're going to explore this thing, right? And we're going to do that properly if and when we go aboard. But first, we're going to make the move Explore a Waypoint. Explore a Waypoint says when you divert from an expedition to examine a notable location, roll plus wits. Okay, that is a weak hit. And the 10 means a momentum burn is not going to help us. So it says on a weak hit you uncover something interesting, but it is bound up in a peril or reveals an ominous aspect of this place. Envision what you encounter, then take +1 momentum. So the +1 momentum takes us to maximum momentum of 10. Okay, so the interesting thing is obviously that there's a vault here, right? And it's sort of in one piece, kind of. Now, how is it bound up in a peril related to this place, this spine of Kronos specifically? I wonder whether or not this thing might just be the source of the power that has corrupted everything here. Like, maybe this thing is sort of like a cosmic superconductor, but it's damaged, and the power that it could generate is now becoming more and more unstable. And what if the Leviathan is actually trying to protect this vault? What if the Leviathan has been corrupted into this like somnambulant guardian of the spine, kind of attacking anyone or anything that gets near? I like that a lot. But we're here now. We've reached this place. We've made it. But guess what? We're not alone. Archer and the others watch as the space on either side of the vault starts to plume and crackle with yellow and green energy, and the telltale snout of the Leviathan once again bursts through the energy cloud on the left. And seconds later, the plume on the right flashes with yellow lightning, and another monstrosity emerges. Just as big, just as warped. Again, it was once a ship, but this one was flatter and wider. Its new chaotic form gives it the look of some kind of horrifying stingray. that trails dozens of metallic barbs behind it like tendrils. They wheel around on the eclipse position, moving with purpose, perhaps boosted by the energy of the vault. And Cole says, "Shall I kill the power? They can't see us if we kill the power." And Archer says, "No." And he points a finger towards the icy blue vault and says, "Full speed ahead." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. And please do check out the Bad Spot Patreon, where you can find all kinds of cool perks and really support the work I'm doing. I'll be back next week, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.